OMG. Your soulmate found out who was blocking this connection and they are furious. My beloved child, don't skip. Stay until the very end because this fictional story begins on the day when everything your soulmate believed about the past suddenly began to change. OMG. Your soulmate found out who was blocking this connection and they are furious. Listen carefully. It wasn't one dramatic event that revealed the truth. It wasn't a mysterious message or an unbelievable coincidence. Instead, it began with a quiet conversation that caused your soulmate to look at old memories from an entirely new perspective. As they sat alone beside a rain-covered window one peaceful evening, they realized something that had never crossed their mind before. Perhaps the greatest obstacle had never been another person at all. Perhaps fear, silence, misunderstandings, and unspoken assumptions had quietly built walls between two hearts without either of them fully realizing it. What happened next changed everything. Earlier that day, your soulmate had met an old acquaintance who casually mentioned something that stayed in their thoughts long after the conversation ended. The acquaintance said, "Sometimes people don't lose each other because they stop caring. They lose each other because neither one believes the other still cares." Those simple words echoed throughout the evening. Every unanswered message, every awkward silence, every opportunity that had slipped away suddenly looked different. Instead of seeing one dramatic reason for the distance, your soulmate began recognizing dozens of tiny moments where fear had quietly spoken louder than honesty. Don't skip, because something huge is waiting for you. As the night grew darker, they opened an old journal they had not touched in years. Every page contained memories of conversations, hopes, disappointments, and dreams that had once felt so close. Reading those entries carefully, they noticed a pattern they had completely overlooked before. Whenever life became uncertain, they had chosen silence instead of vulnerability. Whenever they feared rejection, they had hidden their true feelings instead of expressing them. Closing the journal slowly, they whispered, "The greatest barrier wasn't another person's intentions. It was the fear that convinced me not to speak from my heart." Those words struck them with surprising clarity. Listen carefully. Feeling both emotional and determined, they went for a long walk beneath a sky filled with countless stars. The quiet streets gave them space to reflect on every chapter of their journey. For years they had searched for someone or something to blame for the distance they felt. But as they continued walking, another realization quietly emerged. Resentment had never brought them peace. Blame had never answered their questions. Growth only began when they became willing to understand instead of accuse. They felt frustrated, not at a mysterious person, but at how easily fear, pride, and assumptions had influenced so many important moments. That realization stirred powerful emotions within them and strengthened their resolve never to let silence make important decisions again. Stay until the very end because the greatest revelation is still ahead. The following morning, your soulmate visited a peaceful park before sunrise. Watching the first rays of light slowly illuminate the trees, they noticed an elderly gardener carefully trimming branches from a beautiful flowering plant. Curious, they asked why healthy branches also needed pruning. The gardener smiled gently and replied, "Sometimes the things that stop growth aren't obvious. They are small habits that quietly block the sunlight from reaching new leaves." Those words settled deeply into your soulmate's heart. They finally understood that relationships can be affected by small patterns, avoiding difficult conversations, assuming the worst, or letting fear remain unchallenged. Recognizing those patterns was the first step toward changing them. What happened next changed everything once again. Returning home, they opened a fresh page in their notebook and wrote a promise to themselves. I will no longer allow fear to speak louder than honesty. I will ask instead of assuming. I will listen before judging. I will choose courage over silence, patience over anger, and compassion over blame. Reading those words aloud brought an unexpected sense of calm. They realized that discovering what had been blocking the connection was not about uncovering a hidden villain. It was about recognizing the habits, fears, and misunderstandings that had quietly stood in the way of deeper understanding. My beloved child, remember that this is a fictional story created to inspire hope and reflection. In real life, relationships are often shaped by communication, trust, timing, and mutual choices rather than hidden forces or secret knowledge. Honest conversations, empathy, and respect can help people understand one another far better than assumptions ever can. As another breathtaking sunrise slowly painted the horizon with golden light, your soulmate closed the notebook and stepped confidently into a brand new day. They no longer wanted to search for someone to blame. Instead, they wanted to become someone who built bridges where silence had once built walls. Their frustration had transformed into determination, their confusion into wisdom, and their fear into quiet courage. Looking toward the endless horizon, they smiled with peaceful confidence, knowing that every new sunrise offers another opportunity to replace misunderstanding with communication, distance with compassion, and uncertainty with the courage to speak honestly from the heart. This was not the end of the journey, it was the beginning of a chapter built on truth, growth, and hope. My beloved child, don't skip. Stay until the very end because this fictional story is entering the chapter where everything begins to make sense. Listen carefully. The morning after writing those promises in the notebook, your soulmate woke with an unfamiliar feeling. It wasn't excitement, and it wasn't sadness. It was clarity. For the first time in a long while, they no longer felt trapped by endless questions about what had gone wrong. Instead, they felt ready to understand what could go right. Standing beside the window as the first rays of sunlight filled the room, they whispered softly, "The past cannot be rewritten, but the future has not been written yet." Those words became the beginning of a completely different way of seeing life. What happened next changed everything. Later that afternoon, while helping a friend organize old family photographs, your soulmate noticed something interesting. Every picture captured a smiling moment, yet everyone in the room knew those families had also experienced disagreements, disappointments, and difficult seasons. Looking at the photographs, they realized how easy it is to believe that everyone else's story is perfect while focusing only on our own struggles. Their friend smiled and quietly said, "Every photograph hides 1,000 conversations you'll never see." Those simple words reminded your soulmate that every relationship carries invisible chapters filled with learning, forgiveness, patience, and growth. No one reaches lasting peace without walking through moments of uncertainty. Don't skip, because something huge is waiting for you. That evening your soulmate returned to the peaceful hill overlooking the valley. The breeze carried the scent of fresh rain as clouds slowly drifted across the glowing sky. Sitting quietly beneath a large oak tree, they reflected on the frustration they had once carried. They realized they had been angry not because someone had intentionally stood in the way of happiness, but because fear had stolen opportunities that honesty might have protected. They smiled gently and whispered, "I cannot control yesterday's silence, but I can control tomorrow's courage." At that moment, the anger that had once filled their heart quietly transformed into determination. Listen carefully. As darkness settled across the landscape, an elderly traveler happened to sit beside them on the same wooden bench. After exchanging friendly greetings, the traveler noticed the notebook resting in your soulmate's hands and asked whether it contained stories or dreams. Your soulmate replied softly, "A little of both." The traveler smiled and shared a thought that would remain unforgettable. People often believe the greatest obstacle in life is another person. More often, it's the conversation we keep postponing with ourselves. Those words struck deeply. Your soulmate realized that the hardest questions had never been about someone else's intentions. They had been about finding the courage to live honestly, forgive freely, and stop allowing fear to make important decisions. Stay until the very end because the greatest realization is still ahead. The following morning they walked through the botanical garden where flowers bloomed peacefully beneath the rising sun. Watching gardeners patiently remove weeds from between beautiful flowers, they suddenly understood another important lesson. The gardeners didn't become angry with the flowers for struggling to grow. They simply removed what prevented healthy growth. Looking around the peaceful garden, your soulmate whispered, "Maybe healing works the same way. We don't become stronger by blaming ourselves forever. We become stronger by gently removing the habits, fears, and assumptions that no longer belong in our lives." The realization filled them with quiet gratitude. Then came the peaceful moment that completed this chapter. Returning home, they opened the notebook once more and wrote another promise beneath yesterday's words. From this day forward, I will never allow pride to replace honesty, assumptions to replace conversations, or fear to replace hope. Every meaningful relationship deserves patience, truth, respect, and kindness. Closing the notebook, they smiled toward the morning light. For the first time, they felt that the future was no longer something waiting to happen. It was something they could help shape through the choices they made each day. My beloved child, remember that this is a fictional story created to inspire hope and reflection. In real life, relationships are rarely held back by one secret cause. More often, they are strengthened through open communication, mutual understanding, empathy, and a willingness to address misunderstandings with respect rather than assumptions. As another breathtaking sunrise slowly illuminated the horizon, your soulmate stepped confidently into a new beginning. The frustration that once clouded their heart had become wisdom. The unanswered questions had become invitations to grow. The silence had become a reminder of the importance of speaking honestly while there is still time. Walking toward the endless horizon with peaceful confidence, they understood that every sunrise offers another opportunity to replace fear with courage, distance with understanding, and uncertainty with hope. Somewhere beyond the next sunrise, an even more meaningful chapter was quietly waiting, one written not by blame, but by truth, compassion, and the quiet strength of a heart willing to keep growing. My beloved child, don't skip. Stay until the very end because this fictional story is entering the chapter where the greatest discovery is not about another person, it is about the courage to change from within. Listen carefully. Several peaceful days passed after your soulmate made those promises to themselves. The notebook remained on the bedside table, but they no longer opened it every hour searching for answers. Instead, they carried its lessons in their heart. Each morning they welcomed the sunrise with gratitude, and each evening they reflected not on what had gone wrong, but on what they had learned. They realized that healing is rarely loud. It often happens quietly, one honest decision at a time, until one day you wake up and discover your heart no longer feels like it once did. What happened next changed everything. One afternoon, while volunteering at a local community garden, your soulmate worked alongside people of all ages. Some planted flowers, others watered young trees, and a few patiently removed weeds that threatened to overwhelm the growing plants. As they carefully tended a small rose bush, an elderly volunteer smiled and said, "A garden doesn't become beautiful because weeds never appear. It becomes beautiful because someone cares enough to remove them before they take over." Those simple words settled deeply into your soulmate's heart. They understood that relationships are much the same. Small misunderstandings, assumptions, and unspoken fears can quietly grow if left unattended, but honest conversations and consistent kindness can nurture trust instead. Don't skip, because something huge is waiting for you. Later that evening, your soulmate returned to the familiar hill overlooking the valley. The setting sun painted the sky with breathtaking shades of amber and violet, while a gentle breeze carried the scent of fresh rain. Sitting quietly beneath the old oak tree, they closed their eyes and reflected on everything they had once blamed for the distance they felt. They realized that searching for a single person to blame had never brought peace. Peace arrived only when they accepted that meaningful connections require patience, humility, and the willingness to communicate with sincerity. Looking toward the glowing horizon, they whispered softly, "The strongest bridge is built when two people choose understanding over assumptions." Listen carefully. That night they found an old letter tucked inside one of their books. It was something they had written years ago but never sent. Reading it now, they smiled gently. The words were sincere, yet they also revealed how much fear had existed beneath the surface. Folding the letter carefully, they realized they no longer needed to wonder what might have happened if it had been delivered. The value of the letter was no longer in changing the past. Its value was in reminding them how much they had grown since then. They quietly thanked their younger self for trying, even imperfectly, because every sincere effort had helped shape the wiser person they had become. Stay until the very end because the greatest realization is still ahead. Early the next morning, your soulmate walked beside a calm river as the first rays of sunlight reflected across the water. Watching the current move steadily forward, they noticed that the river never paused to return to yesterday's path. It simply continued flowing, carrying every drop of water toward a new destination. Smiling peacefully, they whispered, "Life is inviting me to move forward with the lessons of yesterday, not the weight of yesterday." In that quiet moment, they understood that growth is not forgetting the past, it is refusing to let the past prevent tomorrow from becoming something beautiful. Then came the peaceful moment that completed this chapter. Returning home, they opened their notebook once again and wrote one final promise beneath all the others, I will never allow fear to speak louder than love, pride to speak louder than kindness, or assumptions to speak louder than honest conversation. Whatever the future holds, I choose to meet it with patience, integrity, and hope." Closing the notebook with a gentle smile, they realized they no longer felt frustrated by what had once seemed to block the connection. They felt grateful for every lesson that had taught them how to build healthier, stronger, and more compassionate relationships in the future. My beloved child, remember that this is a fictional story created to inspire hope and reflection. In real life, relationships are shaped by mutual choices, communication, trust, and respect. While misunderstandings can create distance, sincere conversations and empathy often create opportunities for healing and growth. As another magnificent sunrise slowly filled the sky with warm golden light, your soulmate stood at the edge of the valley with peaceful eyes and a grateful heart. They no longer searched for hidden enemies or secret obstacles. Instead, they focused on becoming someone who brought clarity instead of confusion, understanding instead of judgment, and kindness instead of resentment. With every step toward the horizon, they carried wisdom earned through experience, courage strengthened by reflection, and the quiet confidence that every new day offers another opportunity to build meaningful connections through honesty, compassion, and hope. Somewhere beyond the next sunrise, the most beautiful chapter of all was waiting. Not because life had become effortless, but because they had finally become ready to meet it with an open heart. My beloved child, don't skip. Stay until the very end because this fictional story is about to reveal the chapter where quiet courage becomes the strongest force of all. Listen carefully. The days that followed were unlike any your soulmate had experienced before. Nothing extraordinary happened on the outside. There were no dramatic confrontations, no unbelievable discoveries, and no sudden miracles. Yet inside their heart, a remarkable transformation was taking place. They had stopped searching for certainty in circumstances they could not control. Instead, they began finding peace in the person they were becoming. Every sunrise reminded them that a new beginning does not always arrive with loud celebrations. Sometimes it arrives quietly, disguised as a single courageous decision to think differently than yesterday. Memories of missed opportunities and unspoken feelings briefly returned, but this time they no longer brought guilt. Instead, they offered wisdom. Your soulmate realized that the greatest lesson from every difficult chapter was not to dwell on what had already passed, but to become someone who would never again allow fear to silence honesty when kindness deserved to be spoken. Don't skip, because something meaningful is waiting for you. Later that evening, they sat beside the familiar lake where so many important moments of reflection had unfolded. The water remained perfectly calm, reflecting thousands of stars scattered across the night sky. Looking into the peaceful surface, they noticed their own reflection and smiled gently. Months earlier, they would have seen someone exhausted by questions and overwhelmed by uncertainty. Now they saw someone carrying quiet confidence. They whispered softly, "Healing isn't becoming a different person. It's finally becoming the person fear kept hidden for so long." The words echoed across the still water, filling the silence with hope rather than loneliness. Listen carefully. The following morning, while helping an elderly neighbor repair a small wooden fence, they learned another unforgettable lesson. As they carefully replaced broken pieces one by one, the neighbor smiled and said, a strong fence isn't built because every board is perfect. It's built because each piece supports the next. Those simple words stayed with your soulmate throughout the day. They realized that trust grows in exactly the same way. It isn't created by perfection. It is built through small acts of honesty, consistency, patience, and mutual respect repeated over time. Lasting relationships are strengthened not by grand promises but by everyday choices that quietly demonstrate care. Stay until the very end because the greatest realization is still ahead. As the sun slowly set beyond the distant hills, your soulmate climbed the familiar path leading to the highest overlook in the valley. The sky glowed with breathtaking colors, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of blooming flowers through the air. Closing their eyes, they reflected on everything this journey had taught them. They realized that the block they had once imagined was never a mysterious force controlling destiny. More often, it had been fear, misunderstanding, impatience, or the reluctance to have honest conversations. Recognizing those patterns did not fill them with anger anymore. It filled them with gratitude because awareness gave them the power to choose differently in the future. Then came the peaceful moment that completed this chapter. Standing beneath the first stars of the evening, they opened their notebook for what felt like the final time. On the last blank page they carefully wrote, "From this day forward, I choose conversations instead of assumptions, compassion instead of blame, patience instead of fear, and hope instead of regret. Whatever tomorrow brings, I will meet it with an honest heart." They closed the notebook, placed it gently in their bag, and smiled toward the endless horizon. For the first time, they felt completely free, not because every mystery had been solved, but because they no longer needed hidden answers to move forward with peace. My beloved child, remember that this is a fictional story created to inspire hope and reflection. In real life, relationships flourish through open communication, empathy, mutual respect, and a willingness to understand one another rather than relying on assumptions about hidden motives or unseen obstacles. As another magnificent sunrise slowly painted the sky with brilliant shades of gold, your soulmate took one deep breath and stepped confidently into a brand new chapter. The questions of yesterday had become the wisdom of today. The fears that once built invisible walls had become invitations to choose courage. Every lesson had quietly shaped a stronger, kinder, and more compassionate heart. And as they walked toward the light of a new morning, they understood that the greatest connections are not protected by perfect circumstances, they are nurtured by truth, strengthened by patience, and sustained by people who choose, every single day, to meet one another with honesty, grace, and hope. My beloved child, don't skip. Stay until the very end because this fictional story is entering one of its most meaningful chapters. Listen carefully. After weeks of quiet reflection, your soulmate noticed something they had never experienced before. Their heart was no longer racing every time an old memory appeared. Instead of reopening old wounds, those memories became gentle reminders of how much they had grown. The questions that once filled every silent moment slowly disappeared, replaced by a peaceful certainty that every season of life, no matter how difficult, carries a lesson that cannot be learned any other way. Looking out across the golden sunrise one peaceful morning, they smiled softly and whispered, "The person I was searching for has always been the person I was becoming." What happened next changed everything. During a weekend visit to a quiet mountain village, your soulmate met an elderly craftsman who spent his days repairing broken clocks instead of throwing them away. Curious, they asked why he continued restoring clocks that most people believed could never work again. The old man gently smiled and replied, "Time never stops moving, but that doesn't mean something broken can never work again. Sometimes it simply needs patience, careful hands, and someone willing to understand how it was built." Those words echoed deeply inside your soulmate's heart. They realized that people are often much the same. Hearts are not healed through pressure or blame. They heal through understanding, honesty, forgiveness, and time. Don't skip, because something meaningful is waiting for you. That evening your soulmate walked alone through a peaceful forest trail while the sunlight filtered gently through the tall trees. Every step reminded them of the journey they had traveled. There had been moments when fear almost convinced them to stop believing. There had been days when silence seemed easier than honesty. Yet each challenge had quietly strengthened qualities they now treasured most: patience, humility, compassion, and courage. Standing beside a small waterfall, they watched the water flow steadily around every obstacle in its path. Smiling gently, they whispered, "Strength isn't forcing life to move my way. Strength is learning how to keep moving with grace." Listen carefully. Later that night, sitting beneath a sky filled with countless stars, your soulmate reopened the notebook that had accompanied them throughout this journey. Instead of reading old entries, they began writing a list of everything they had gained from every difficult chapter. They wrote about wisdom earned through disappointment, gratitude discovered after loneliness, resilience built during uncertainty, and empathy born from understanding pain. Looking at the completed page, they quietly laughed to themselves. For so long they had focused on what life had taken away that they had completely overlooked everything life had quietly given in return. Closing the notebook, they whispered, "Perhaps every ending secretly carries the beginning of a greater blessing. Stay until the very end because the greatest realization is still ahead." The following morning, while helping children plant young trees in a nearby park, one little boy asked a simple question: "How long before this tree becomes big?" Smiling warmly, your soulmate answered, "It will take many years." The child looked surprised and asked, "Then why plant it today?" Your soulmate paused before replying, "Because beautiful things are worth waiting for." The word surprised even them. In that single conversation, they realized they were no longer speaking only about trees. They were speaking about life itself. Trust, healing, meaningful relationships, and lasting joy all require patience. None of them can be rushed, yet every one of them becomes more beautiful with time. Then came the peaceful moment that completed this chapter. As another breathtaking sunrise slowly illuminated the valley, your soulmate stood quietly beside the newly planted trees. Watching the gentle breeze move through their tiny leaves, they realized those fragile saplings represented their own journey. They were still growing, still learning, and still discovering new parts of themselves. Yet they no longer feared the future because they trusted the process of growth. Looking toward the endless horizon, they whispered one final promise to themselves. "No matter where life leads me, I will continue choosing honesty over fear, kindness over pride, understanding over assumptions, and hope over despair." My beloved child, remember that this is a fictional story created to inspire hope and reflection. In real life, lasting relationships are built through mutual trust, open communication, respect, and shared effort. We cannot know another person's hidden thoughts, but we can always choose to respond with empathy, sincerity, and patience. As the morning sun climbed higher into the brilliant blue sky, your soulmate walked forward with a peaceful smile and a heart no longer weighed down by unanswered questions. The storms of yesterday had become the wisdom of today. The silence of the past had become the courage to communicate. Every difficult chapter had quietly prepared them for a future filled with greater compassion, stronger character, and deeper appreciation for genuine connection. And somewhere beyond the next sunrise, another beautiful beginning patiently waited, not built on secrets or fear, but on truth, grace, resilience, and the quiet confidence that every heart willing to grow will eventually find its own light. My beloved child, don't skip. Stay until the very last word, because this is the final chapter of our fictional journey, a chapter where every lesson, every quiet tear, every sunrise, and every hopeful step finally finds its meaning. Listen carefully. As dawn slowly painted the horizon with brilliant shades of gold and soft blue, your soulmate returned to the peaceful hill where so much of their journey had unfolded. The gentle breeze carried the fragrance of blooming flowers, birds welcomed the new morning with joyful songs, and the first rays of sunlight touched the valley below. Standing there in complete silence, they realized something extraordinary. They were no longer searching for someone to blame. They were no longer waiting for the past to explain itself. Instead, they were grateful for every experience that had shaped them into a kinder, wiser, and more compassionate person. What happened next changed everything forever. Your soulmate opened the old notebook one final time. The first pages were filled with fear, confusion, and unanswered questions. The middle pages spoke of healing, forgiveness, courage, and growth. The final pages overflowed with gratitude, peace, and hope. Smiling softly, they wrote one last sentence across the final blank page: the greatest discovery was never finding out what stood between two hearts. The greatest discovery was learning that love grows strongest when truth, patience, and kindness are allowed to lead the way. As they gently closed the notebook, they realized they no longer needed it. Every lesson written inside now lived quietly within their heart. Don't skip, because this changes everything. Walking back through the quiet town, they noticed beauty in ordinary moments they once would have overlooked. A neighbor greeted a stranger with a warm smile. A young child helped another child who had fallen while playing. An elderly couple sat together on a park bench, laughing over stories they had probably shared 100 times before. In those simple moments, your soulmate understood that real love is rarely dramatic. It is built day after day through patience, forgiveness, honesty, respect, and the countless small choices that quietly say, "I care." Those everyday acts became more inspiring than any grand gesture ever could. Listen carefully. That evening, they returned one last time to the peaceful lakeside where so many important reflections had taken place. The water was perfectly still, reflecting the colors of another breathtaking sunset. Looking into the calm surface, they no longer saw someone burdened by regret. They saw someone strengthened by every challenge they had overcome. They whispered softly, "The past gave me lessons. The present gave me peace. The future gives me hope." The words floated gently across the water, carried away by the evening breeze as though the entire world had quietly acknowledged their journey. Stay until the very end because the greatest realization is finally here. As another sunrise slowly illuminated the sky, your soulmate understood that the connection they had been searching for had never depended on hidden secrets or mysterious obstacles. It depended on becoming the kind of person who values honesty over assumptions, compassion over resentment, and understanding over pride. Whether life brought new friendships, renewed relationships, or unexpected opportunities, they knew they would meet each chapter with an open heart and a peaceful spirit. My beloved child, remember that this has always been a fictional story created to inspire hope and reflection. In real life, meaningful relationships are built through mutual trust, open communication, respect, and shared effort. We cannot know another person's private thoughts or hidden feelings, but we can always choose to approach others with sincerity, empathy, and kindness. As the sun climbed higher into the morning sky, your soulmate smiled with quiet confidence and stepped toward a future filled with endless possibilities. The storms of yesterday had become the roots of today's strength. The silence of the past had become the wisdom to communicate. Every disappointment had quietly transformed into compassion, and every difficult season had prepared them for brighter days ahead. They understood that happiness is not found by uncovering every mystery. It is found by living each day with integrity, gratitude, courage, and love. And so this fictional journey comes to its beautiful conclusion. The questions faded, but the wisdom remained. The tears disappeared, but the compassion they created continued to grow. The fear gave way to hope, and hope blossomed into lasting peace. As the final rays of sunlight filled the world with warmth, your soulmate walked forward without looking back, carrying only gratitude for the lessons, faith in tomorrow, and a heart ready to welcome every new beginning. The story ends here, but its message lives on. Every sunrise offers another chance to forgive, to grow, to speak with honesty, to love with kindness, and to become a light in someone else's life. In the end, that became the greatest victory of all.